Hey everyone, let's talk about transferring patterns onto dark fabric. Specifically, this is a method that I had to use yesterday because the usual way that I used to transfer onto dark fabric was not working and I'll explain that in a minute about why that fabric just wasn't working with my usual method. But first let me quickly explain the way that I like to do it most of the time. I print my pattern out, cut it out so that it will fit inside the back of my stretched fabric. Turn it face down, tape it in place. I hold it up to a bright light, and then I use a white gel pen to trace it onto the fabric. And I'll show you, see if you can see it here. Can you see that? See if you hold it up and sort of press up against it, and you can see those dark lines through the fabric. Even a dark fabric, that works. But the fabric that I was using yesterday was not working because it's a linen. And I love stitching on linen, but it has more of a texture to it and more of a kind of a woven design. So that when I put this pattern behind it and put the light behind it, I couldn't see the dark lines of my pattern because of the texture in the linen. All I could just see was the woven lines. And this pattern is obviously pretty intricate, and I wanted to be very exact, so that just was not working. So what I had to do was adapt. So what I did is, I'm going to use this one again to show you. I put my fabric, stretched my fabric in the hoop. I cut out, this is white graphite paper. You can buy it, I bought this at Hobby Lobby. It's two sheets of white graphite paper, also called carbon paper. You can also get this brand. I've had this one forever, 100 years it seems like, and you get a sheet of white, gray, blue, yellow, and red. And you can see I've used these over and over and over. But it does come with a sheet of white, so you can use that on your dark fabric. So anyway, I cut a circle. Once I traced this pattern, I laid it on the white graphite paper, traced around it, and cut it out so it's the exact same size. So I've got my stretched fabric here, my white graphite paper. There's a side that's a little bit chalkier and a side that's shiny. Test it out to make sure you've got the right side, the correct side down. So I'm putting the chalky side down onto the fabric. Then I put my pattern face up this time down into the hoop, taped it in place. Then I just use a regular ballpoint pen. This is like a cheap hotel ballpoint. And I press very hard as I was tracing the design, and I went over, pressing down as hard as I can over each line, pressing through and transferring the white carbon graphite onto the dark fabric, so that when you take this out, you will now have your pattern transferred onto this side of the fabric. Now, the other thing I did, because I'm fussy about getting my fabric restretched exactly the way I want it, I stitched just with sewing thread, a quick running stitch around the edge so that I would know, because what I would have to do is take this out of this hoop, flip it over, because I like to stitch on this side. I don't stitch on this side. I like to have the fabric facing up. I flipped the fabric over, rehooped it, so it looks like this. So now it's on this side. Now the problem with the carbon is that it does transfer very well. The white does transfer onto the dark fabric, but it's a little bit light, and kind of as it can sort of be rubbed off, and as I'm stitching, this is obviously going to take me a little bit of time, and I didn't want to be trying to struggle to see the lines. So I then took my white gel pen and I traced over the carbon lines. Perhaps you can see a little bit, maybe in some places like right here, you can see the leftover of the carbon. But that way, it's just easier for me to see the lines as I'm stitching. So this is a multi-step process. It takes a little bit longer than the method where you just pop that pattern behind there and hold it up to a light, trace it, and you're done, ready to stitch. But sometimes if the dark fabric is just not letting you see through the pattern that way, this method works very well. There was one other thing I was going to tell you. I can't remember what it was at the moment. I'll remember it as soon as I turn the video off, I'm sure. But anyway, this method works really great. A few more tools, but when it's just not working the other way, this is a great method to use. All right, bye-bye.